And here we go. All right. So I'm the worst at doing like introductions. I'm a huge fan of free flow, but one thing I really appreciated about our last conversation, Josh, is you essentially taking climate change and environmentalism and basically translating it in a way that the common layperson can understand. How is it affecting like me, my bottom line, my dollar? How can I do things better, right? So, you're obviously doing a lot of very interesting things, which is why I really appreciate you reaching out to me. But I'd love if you gave the audience or whatever, your quick elevator pitch, and we can go into some of the more interesting stuff you've been up to.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for that, OT. I appreciate it. I spent a couple of decades launching, building sustainable ventures, everything from tech startups to very like design-driven sustainable furniture companies. I've done media, had a Sirius XM radio show and TV show called The Lazy Environmentalist on Sundance Channel. I was actually just writing this morning that gave me an opportunity to have lunch with Robert Redford. I just was writing a little bit about that on social since he passed away and what that meant to me. And I've kind of built my career that way. So some of that has led to some really cool climate tech. Built a company called Planted, where we're actually making building materials, structural materials out of fast growing grass. It sounds a little bit crazy when you say it out loud, but we're working with the largest home builder in America, D.R. Horton. So someone believes in us. And now I'm on to the next project called Super Cool, where we take all of the coolest stuff happening in market today from a business perspective in terms of growing product, profit, capturing market share, shifting markets, transforming industries that are also cutting carbon in the process. And so it's like we're looking for the evidence that says, what is this moment we're in today? I believe we're in a different climate moment. I believe we're in this moment around adoption of really awesome solutions that are here. It's not a
Yeah.
someday might this happen. It's actually, no, this is underway. We want to tell you about it and teach you about it because there's some really cool opportunities for different types of businesses to adopt some fantastic solutions that are really gaining traction right now.
Yeah, no, and I really like that. I was really actually intrigued by the panel company, and I'd love if you further elaborate on that, because you were basically mentioning that you're able to create an environmentally sustainable product that's actually better than what's currently on the market itself right now, and I think that's such a fascinating story.
Yeah, this was to say it out loud. The whole thing was a little bit, in my mind, it was has been completely awesome and very crazy. And it came about from a conversation I had only 4 years ago with an engineer who had left SpaceX. I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, up in the mountains. I was working on furniture company number 2, sustainable design, manufacturing North Carolina, using really the most responsible kind of beautifully designed materials we could use, which was very high grade, responsibly harvested wood, but feeling frustrated, feeling stuck because it was COVID. So I was really having a hard time getting my factory going. We were getting shut down. I was thinking a lot about this material. And someone introduced me to this guy who had moved to Raleigh. We get on the phone and they had said, look, you should talk to him. He's doing manufacturing as well. I took a look at this guy's website. Looked like it was from the AOL era, and I'm a very design driven, aesthetic driven person. I was like, I don't know if I need to talk to this guy. But he was very persistent. So Wada got on the phone with me and we start talking, and he's like, oh man, Josh, you're going to build this huge furniture company. It's all sustainable. It's so great. I was like, nah, like if it becomes huge, it'd be great for my family, but I don't really know that we're doing that much good for the planet. We're still using trees. And he's like, well, what would you do? And I'm like, I don't know, a different material or a different feedstock, something, maybe hemp. And he's like, wow, I've got 6 trash bags of hemp in my garage. And I was like, wait, what? Who are you? And he's like, oh, I just moved here. I spent 8 years at SpaceX. I was leading the life support systems team, keeping astronauts alive on the Dragon crew spacecraft. And now I'm here in Raleigh. And I was like, wait, you left LA, you moved here. And so within about 10 minutes, we were basically like, or I said to him, I was like, look, here's what I think we should do. I'm going to shut my company. I think you should shut your company. Let's build a materials company. And it was good timing because Elon was already talking a lot about carbon removal from the atmosphere. How can we do that efficiently? And from a physics perspective, just laying out the case that a lot of people don't really want to hear, but that there's just not enough physical land to plant enough trees to actually make a very significant dent in solving climate change. You simply do not have enough physical, trees take a lot of time to grow. And if you're talking about gigaton scale carbon removal, if you really do the math, and a lot of it, as engineers will, you'll see it doesn't really pencil for trees. You need something that can grow much faster.
That's really interesting because I feel like people don't know that. Like, so basically, you're trying to say, in terms of being able to be, like, say, carbon net neutral as a planet, right now. I mean, the traditional way would be to have trees do their whole. I forget, what's it called again? That's the food process called
The photosynthesis where they're
photosynthesis,
yeah,
exactly, right. Which
yeah,
basically
yeah.
is that's how carbon is captured as well too, right?
That's right.
Um,
Right.
that's how people think we fix climate change. But I did not know that we don't have enough physical space to actually plant enough trees to fix the problem right now.
Yeah, at the scale that we're talking about, a global planetary scale, given how much carbon's in the atmosphere, how much needs to be removed. And so when you think about that and an engineer thinks about it, well, then you say, okay, if we're going to do this in a natural way, then we have to have something that simply grows a lot faster than trees. Because if something grows, right, then it's going to be absorbing carbon much faster. Hemp grows very fast. That's why we talked about hemp. And we thought, well, maybe that's a starting point. We explored hemp. But we ended up finding this grass, very similar to bamboo. Now, bamboo grows incredibly fast.
Yeah,
The problem with bamboo, well, there were two problems for us. One, it's too thick. And so there's actually no mechanical way to harvest, right? You just need a lot of hands, and you can't do it in America. It'd be too expensive. The other thing about bamboo, because we tested bamboo to turn it into a panel that you would nail to the 2x4s, basically you nail it to the sticks when you're building a house, is that it's too, in some respects, it's too good, meaning it's too dense, it's too hard, it's too structural. And the problem for a home builder is that means if you're going to try and swap out the materials home builders use today, which is something called oriented strand board or plywood, if you were using bamboo, it's too hard to drive a nail through it. You have to have some different process, right? You have to have an alternative building technique. And we knew if we were going to try and get to massive scale,
yeah,
we would have to have a product that would be a drop-in replacement for the materials builders use today. Same density, same nail pull through, same specs, so that a builder on a job site wouldn't even necessarily know that they were using something made from grass instead of trees, only that it actually might be a little bit easier to use. It might be lighter, but have more strength, which our product can do, or something like that. And so that was really important to us. So we found this grass that grows exceptionally fast, 10 times faster, and we now work with. We're in North Carolina working with former tobacco farmers who we've gotten to convert from
yeah,
this like 19th century, 18th century, 15th century, age-old crop to
yeah.
a 21st century climate crop, which is this grass, which pays them well. We can harvest, we can grow with them. And then with a SpaceX team, we got more SpaceXers to move to North Carolina. Somehow we actually did this. And we invented this technology, which takes a mill, which is usually the size of like a small town. These things are huge, smokestacks going up like football fields into the sky. And we basically eliminated all of that. We built an electric production technology about 140 feet long. We basically shrunk it all down, right? We took all the components, how you gotta slice, you gotta either slice a tree, you gotta slice their grass, you gotta put a little bit of resin on it, mix it all together, and then you gotta get it into a giant press that's gonna compress like all of this kind of grass and in our case, and a little bit of resin down to something that's, about half an inch thick, 4 feet by 8 feet wide, and that's the panel. So we built a technology. You can think of it almost like going from a massive small town to like a desktop printer, right? And like about 140 feet later, we have panels now coming off this line that are more moisture resistant. Depending if we can play with strength in different ways if we want to.
Yeah.
We're competitive on price. And we've really rethought how you actually do this so that you pull carbon from the atmosphere of the grass, you don't give it back up a smokestack during
Yeah.
manufacturing,
Yeah.
and then you can sequester that carbon dioxide away in the panel within the walls and the roofs of new homes where people will move in.
Actually, unreal. That's a really great story. So and so obviously you got Horton. That's a great story. As a sales guy, I'm interested in sort of understanding how the market's been like how they've been receiving the product.
So it's not all, of course, there's not all one reaction, right? It was pretty amazing. We started working with D.R. Horton. So we founded this company in 2021. We founded it about 4 years ago. We raised a $2 million seed round the fall of 2021. Coming out of that seed round, we were introduced to the team at D.R. Horton through an investor. And the conversation, climate, what I'm describing to you, that was helpful as a door opener. But what really interested D.R. Horton early on was the fact that, this panel we're making has some kind of inherent moisture resistance characteristics. And moisture is a huge issue on job sites. If when you're building, all the stuff's exposed to the weather, and particularly in humid, parts of the country where most people are moving to the south, it's a real issue if those panels start to get wet, if moisture starts to get into them. You usually have to wrap them in something. That's more cost. And so we were developing something that was really interesting from a product feature standpoint. And then the other thing that attracted D.R. Horton was, as I just described to you, OT, this grass that we can grow and this shrunken down production facility, that gives us a lot of flexibility about where we place it. And so from a supply chain perspective, we can actually grow and manufacture much closer potentially to where home builders want to build, which means you
Oh,
remove all this cost, right? Because
logistic.
if you're logistics, because
Yeah.
if you're trucking like giant trees, all the diesel, all the expense. So the way we've conceived this business, we thought we have to be able to win on cost in the field. We believe we can because we can grow so much faster. This is an ag supply chain, not a forest supply chain, especially as it matures. We believe we know we can win on logistics, and that's a lot of the cost. And we believe that we can win in the factory. There's also things in our product we don't have to use as much chemicals and resin and the high cost components. We just think there's an opportunity to win at each stage of this process and actually have a product that not only has this climate benefit, but actually wins on cost. And if you can win on cost and you install exactly the same way as what builders use today, and you get the largest builder to give you the credibility, then the market eventually will follow. But to your original question, the market doesn't just say like, oh, awesome. Mostly what the market says is like, that's new. I'm going to let someone else take the risk because I'm on the hook for that house for a very long time if something goes wrong, right? And
Um,
so landing D.R. Horton was huge for us. Now we have a contract also, we're working on actually building the studs, the kind of the 2x4s, not just the panels, and we're working with some other companies to develop, future product. There's a lot of interest in what we're doing, and we're in a fortunate position to have a strategic partner who's going to help us prove a lot of this out so the market can kind of come along with us as we grow.
yeah, that it sounds like you're at like a huge inflection point because, like, if you look at the buyer journey, sounds like you have been able to create you've been able to create a solution for a problem that many people don't know the solution exists for, right? So the thing right now probably is creating problem awareness, right? And the next stage of the buyer journey is consideration, where like the buyer basically reviews case studies or like peer reviewed information, blah blah. That's Horton, right? So I think that Horton deal is going to be huge for you because that's going to work as a case study for everybody else. That's essentially just be at decision because it's like, hey, they have an amazing product. They're working with one of the largest home builders in the U.S. Why not just go ahead and buy it right now, right? And the other thing I wanted to say too is like I can totally understand the interest in your company right now. So I was in financial sales at a fund that actually launched a couple of ESG funds. And it was very interesting because there was a lot of fear, whatever, to that space. However, it sort of underperformed over, let's say, the last 5 years or so. And I think it's because there's a lot of greenwashing and whatnot, or companies that didn't really provide a lot of value. So I could see myself right now as an investor, as a fund company, whatever, seeing your company be like, hey, this is fire. Like this is unreal because everything, especially the logistics story you sold, because that plays so much more so into your ICP or like the Hortons of the world, because logistics is crazy expensive right now in an inflationary environment, right? So if I can cut down my costs for logistics and then actually be able to have a better product, that's unreal. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm amazed. I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I don't.
upgrade. This is
I mean, thank you for that. It's really, thank you for that. And I think that's, we did spend a lot of time, as I described to you, before we incorporated, thinking those things through, but really from this kind of point of view, like remove the climate, like take climate out of this, take sustainability, like, okay, yeah, that's a hook that has you know, some appeal, but really like if we're going to be transformational and really try and shift a market over time, we know we absolutely have to win on cost.
yeah.
And we know, right? And we know that, and then we learned, I will say, over the last few years, or we started dialing like, oh, we get it. Like we can really be, because of the logistics, as you're keying into, really strategic, right? So it's like, yeah, we have this tech. Yes, we're climate. Yes, we're tech, but we can be really strategic because of this logistics piece. And the more today that we can localize in this way, the more that we are not subject to tariffs, right? Because a lot of wood comes in from Canada, and then we're not subject to instability in the world because a lot of wood comes in from Russia, Baltic birch, right? As long as, like, when we're doing this as locally as possible, we can take out cost and we can eliminate a lot of that financial and geopolitical risk in the supply chain for really big builders. Yeah, that's very appealing.
That's unreal. And as a Canadian, it's funny. The first thing I thought was like, Canadians hate this company for these 5 reasons, you know. But it's like securing supply chains right now is a huge thing, and again, that really adds into what you're trying to say. I think you guys have been doing that. I think you guys have created an amazing company right now, and honestly, like, as a nerd, I always get very entertained when somebody or founders are actually able to create real value. Because unfortunately, as a millennial, I feel like a lot of the companies throughout my lifestyle have not really been providing a lot of net value, right? So it's cool to see this. This is an amazing story, and I think we need more of that, right? I'm assuming, like, being in the space, you probably, and because obviously as well, the what's keeping you busy for the other 50% of the time, right, is we're speaking with other companies that are, let's say, in sustainability, that provide similar value, right? So have you found other people that are doing like similar things to you, or on your level? Like, I'm making the assumption you probably like gotten in touch with some amazing founders who've had some really crazy innovative ideas that are similar to yours.
Well, it's interesting to hear your perspective, and it's interesting to hear you say, as a millennial, that companies maybe don't really like walk their talk, let's say, or right. And as you're saying that, what's triggering for me is I got to talk to Mike Faraday recently of Faraday Clothing. I'm not sure if you know that brand yet. Fast growing, redefining kind of the sort of premium American surfer, beach casual. Like, you can wear it at the beach, you can wear it in the city. It's all about comfort. We got to hear his story. And it's so interesting because they, in a little over a decade, they've grown to 80 stores, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. Behind that company is a very transparent and committed sustainability story. And so they're one of the few companies that actually publishes an impact report that transparently says, like, here's our goals, here's our targets, here's what we're doing, right? And so when you look at like their signature t-shirts or some of their pants, they're now made from regenerative organic cotton from farms, like, as far as you can go. Like, it's not just going to be organic, it's going to be regenerative. Most people don't really know what regenerative means, but like we're documenting it. And or we're using like 88% of our polyester is recycled, and we trace all of our factories, and here's all the information. And what I loved about this was that, like, when my brother, for example, who doesn't understand what I do for a living, doesn't understand the environment, like, has like, doesn't, these are not his values. But I'm in like, dude, I just interviewed Mike Faraday from Faraday. He's like, oh, I love Faraday. I'm like, yeah, you're wearing all sustainable clothing. He's like, I am. I'm like, yeah, good job. And so that, right, like this lever of like, let's go build a great lifestyle company. We don't have to sell you on the regenerative organic. We're just going to give it to you, right? It's just baked in. That is so powerful. Because then when people do discover it, or when they're like, oh, check that out, Jalen Brunson on the Knicks, he's rocking Faraday. And they're like, yeah, and did you know that, like, that top he's wearing is like 88, blah, 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 right, recycled. People are like, oh, it's just an extra little hook, but you
Yeah,
don't have to lead with sustainability, right? And so I find that to be a great example of how do you push these values into the mainstream? Well, go build a kick-ass brand and
yeah.
just make this part of it. Because, if you ask Mike, he's like, of course, like, our name's on the brand. We're just going to do the right thing, but we're going to be really transparent about how we're doing. And we're not saying we're perfect, right? That's the other piece. Like, we're not going to be like, we're number one. I was at Amazon for a couple of years. I built a business at Amazon called Vine.com, like tomato on the vine. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah,
it was like a Whole Foods before they bought Whole Foods, this
yeah,
e-commerce business.
yeah,
I mentioned in my quick intro that I used to have a TV show called The Lazy Environmentalist in this radio show. So I'd spend a lot of time talking to consumers about like, how do you make choices that are more convenient? How do we go find those choices? How do we make this easy? How do we make it fit your life? And so I went to Amazon and I was the general manager on this business, had the P&L, we launched it. It was really cool. I did an interview with the New York Times and gave this point of view. It's like, yeah, we're making choices. We're making stuff much easier for moms. You're going to find your seventh generation diapers, your Burt's Bees, whatever. Like, we're just going to make natural organic living because we're Amazon so much more convenient.
Yeah.
We're not saying we're the greenest company in the world, right? And then like the interview comes out. I thought it was good. My boss thought it was good. Immediately, I get a call from the head of worldwide communications for Amazon, like their head of PR. And he's like, okay, first of all, we are the greenest company in the world. Second of all, you're never talking to the press again.
It's a quick one too, you know?
That's it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, so it was like, really? We are? Okay, I don't know that we can really back that up, but that doesn't, that seems to be what maybe sometimes where some of that, like your comment, a little more of that skepticism, a little more of that, like, well, they're telling us one thing, but I don't know if I really like, if it's so believable.
Yeah, well, no, I think the one thing I appreciate about you and the way you go about things, that you actually approach things. It's not even that you really approach things. It's like the outcomes of your actions actually end up providing impact, and I think that's the biggest difference in this space. Impact's an important word, because it basically shows people like literally like how, like, what in my life, that what can I tangibly see is being affected, right? So I think that's very important in what you're doing, your messaging, and just in general, like going forward from an environmental perspective. The other thing too, right? So like I like approaching these things from like a human angle. And I find like one of the major problems with, like, let's say content or social media is that, you have all of these great speakers like Alex Hormozy or David Goggins, which I have a lot of appreciation for, right? But I find, going back to impact, why are you working so hard? Like, what are you what are you working towards, right? So, like, just to turn that back around again, if you were to like have one message to your younger self, like let's say your 19-year-old self, because like I do have a decent Gen Z following that watches this, like what would that be?
Hmm. Um, all right. So if I had a message to my gosh, I think I would say, like, just chill out, man. Like, life is long. It's like it's going to work out.
Yeah.
Like, I've lived my life, I mean, really since I was probably 19, for better or worse, always looking for meaning, right? Like, very cognizant of like, what do I value? And it hasn't always been the environment. I mean, that came about in my 20s, and it came about because when I was in college, I was very interested in international affairs. I studied in France. I came back from my senior year, and I got very interested in China. I'm not even exactly sure why, but I wrote my thesis on China. And in 1993, I started being very clear to me that, whoa, in the 21st century, this China-US relationship is going to be the most important in the world. Like, I don't know why I could see it. I could see it. And I felt like I need to go to China. I don't know if I'm going to join the CIA. I don't know if I'm going to be a diplomat, but I need to get there. I need to spend some time in China. I need to position myself because I got to make sure, I have to make sure, right, that in the future that the US and China have strong relationships, and that this is going to be so important to the, future abundance of the planet and security and peace. Like, it was clear.
That's so cool. But I want to interject for a second. So you almost had like a call to action.
I always have. I always have.
Can
I've
you
always,
Could you elaborate
yeah,
on that? I feel like it takes like a level of confidence to believe in yourself and that call to action. I'd love to hear more about that.
sure.
Yeah.
So this, I have a couple of thoughts as I'm thinking about it. There's something very classic, I think, about founders that, and so I do think I have this kind of piece in my personality. Founders, it's often said in one way or another, have to create their own sort of self-delusional bubble that they are in fact going to change the world, and
Yeah.
and have to be sort of messianic in what
Yeah.
they're doing,
Yep.
because really, like, you have no resources and the whole world stacked against you, right? So you just have to have like ultimate belief, um, which is crazy, but I do think there's some truth in that. I think in my personality, that probably is in there too. And I've always kind of thought critically about where do I think the world is going? What do I think are the biggest, dynamics drivers of that world? And can I play some role? Can I be where the action is? For some reason, that's been part of me as from an early age. And so when my focus was on international relations and diplomacy, globalization, then I looked around and thought, okay, there's China. That's going to be the most important. The Cold War's over. As an American, America, think we, for better or worse, like define ourselves very often against an adversary, right? So when you had the Cold War, it's like, well, we know this, we know we hate the Soviets, so that gives us a sense of who we are, right? Now we like don't really have an adversary, like we're kind of like, oh, China, but like we don't really know, so we just sort of like hate
Fight
each
ourselves.
other, fight
Yeah.
ourselves, right?
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what I mean. It's not really healthy. It's really kind of like kindergarten-ish, but
Yeah.
like I do think that's part of who we are. And so, yeah, China was my focus. So I went there for a couple of years and I got a job teaching English on a university. I just figured out a way to get there. And I felt like if I get there, I didn't have a plan. I was just like, if I get there, cool stuff will happen. And so I do think there's like a mindset, an openness mindset, and I've brought that to the environment too. I was like, if I just go to China and I've got a job there, so I'm set up, cool stuff will happen. Well, weird stuff happened and it was cool, but I ended up being a bicycle lock salesman for an American company called Kryptonite that opened a factory like 20 minutes from where I was teaching. And
Yeah.
I'm in this factory, like handing out Marlboro cigarettes, trying to make friends. I don't speak Chinese, just trying to like have all this experience, not trying to think like, oh, I'm going to have a career in business, but thinking I should get to know every facet of this country. I should know the academics. I should know the business world. Because I'm either going to be in the CIA or I'm going to be a diplomat. So this is going to bode well. And then I ended up through a crazy series of events, opening an office for this company, Kryptonite, becoming their business manager at like age 24. My office was inside the state-owned compound of this Chinese communist country who had contracted to buy 10,000 of these locks from us. And I'm having lunch with like this Communist Party member every day. And I'm in places where I know like Americans aren't even really supposed to go.
Yeah.
But I've got all these, my friends are like these Communist Party members. They're like, come on, let's go, like, get drunk and sing karaoke. And we're far enough away from Beijing that like, it's cool. Like no one's really watching. And so the whole time, like, I'm such an idiot. Like I'm so delusional that I went and bought the smallest camera I could find in some electronics shop. Like I'm such an idiot, man. Because I'm thinking like, I know the CIA is going to show up. They got to be watching this. Like I'm
It's like opening doors. Like where?
yeah, I'm like, hello, like, dude, does anyone see where I am right now? Like, I don't even know how I got in here, So, yeah,
that's that's hilarious. No, that's awesome though, because again, I think like it's twofold. Like you're a very smart person. You had a call to action, but it's also like the confidence and bravery, right? Like to be able to believe that, good things will happen from taking this risk, right? And it's actually so funny. I've been talking a lot. This is the third time that I've been talking about risk in the last 24 hours. And I always find like that's important. The rule of three is right. And it's interesting. Like risk is such an interesting concept because the way it's sold when you're younger is that you sort of should stay away from it. Risk is a bad thing. Defer to security more than anything else, right? But at the end of the day, what it comes down to is that innovation only happens when risk occurs. Realistically speaking, things only happen when risk occurs, right? Like new things can only occur when risk occurs, right? So, like, is there like a line? Because I feel like that there is like a line between like people who have like a propensity to take risk, being high performers and successful, versus like let's say gambling degenerate addicts.
good question. Yeah, that is a
Yeah,
good question.
yeah,
Where is that line, and how do you find that line? I mean, just thinking about it as you're saying it, I think somehow it's probably you know, mm, probably be fortunate to be raised in a certain kind of ethics, that I wasn't even fully aware of, just was kind of instilled in my upbringing. So probably something in that. Like I'm probably lucky where, because I do think that there's, yeah, where's that edge? Where do you become sort of addicted? Where do you actually the choices go? And I do like I have made a lot of like I would say ill-advised choices. There's no
yeah,
question, right? But
yeah,
I do think that if someone is on a quest to live their life based on their values, based on what drives meaning in their professional work, there's no question that that can be, and I think ultimately is satisfying. And there is no question that I think there is inevitable pain in that journey, because nothing works out perfectly. Nothing, almost nothing ever works out perfectly. And you do fail as
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
but I think it's like, even in that, quote unquote failure, what can you take from it? And I'll give you an example. When I came back to the States, having gone through it, ended up, enjoying business. I liked working with this company, Kryptonite. It was turned into a really wonderful experience. We didn't end up selling, millions of locks to billions of Chinese riding bicycles, but man, was it such an interesting experience getting into the business world there. So I went to business school, came out of business school in 2000, just as the dot-com explosion was happening, right? The bust. And I signed on to a dot-com kind of at the tail end of that still had some cash, and I moved to Los Angeles, and quickly realized that this was not a great situation. And so, I had a lot of debt. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So I quit my job, got in my car, and just like drove to Montana. And I decided, I think I was 27, 28. I decided that I was having a quarter life crisis. I actually think I invented that. I think before it became like a thing, I was like, I'm having a quarter life crisis. I'm just gonna go to Montana and like buy like a guitar and a fishing rod and like go down the river and figure out my next move. And I don't play the guitar or like fish, but I did like get to Missoula, go to a pawn shop, get the gear, get a case of beer, check into a motel, and I'm like, okay, tomorrow, figure out the next step. And wake up the next day. It's September. There's about 8 inches of snow on the ground. So okay, well, that plans out. I'll just drink this case of beer. So drink the beer, go to the bookstore, and I'm like walking down the bookstore, and I'm thinking, I'm saying to myself, I must have been crazy, but I'm saying to myself, I'm like, who are my heroes? Who are my heroes? Who are my heroes? And I'm like, authors are my heroes. Hemingway, blah, blah, whoever. And I get to the screenwriting section, and then I think to myself, well, you know what? Oh, yeah, I live in LA. Authors are my heroes, but screenwriting, I really like movies. I could do this. I'm going to be this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a screenwriter. And so I go back to my motel, call my folks, collect. And I remember my mom and dad get on the phone, and I'm like, guys, great news. I quit my job. I'm in Montana, and I'm going to be a screenwriter.
All things
my,
considered here.
my mom, yeah, exactly. My mom was always, she passed away a number of years ago, but she was always, at least tried to be supportive, right? She's like, oh, honey, something, whatever. My dad's like, uh-huh. And do you know how to write screenplays? And I'm like, well, Dad, I just got this book, How to Write a Screenplay in 21 Days. And he's like, uh-huh. And he's like, and what day are you on? I'm like, no, I just read the introduction. It's going to be great. Just like click. I think you should find another job, son, as fast as possible. It's like, yeah. So it'll work out. Anyway, I did go back to LA. I did write 2 screenplays. Both of them were terrible. And I was selling used fitness equipment on eBay to kind of make ends meet, because either in LA at the time you're either like a screenwriter or a fitness guru. And so my next door neighbor was a fitness guru, and he was like, have I got a job for you? Let's go buy up all the Bowflexes and Soloflexes and like Chuck Norris whatever's in LA, because this is the used fitness capital of the world, and like we'll sell them on eBay and we'll do the like eBay arbitrage thing. And I was like, great idea. So I filled my apartment with like universal gyms and all this stuff. And then I'd spend like 3 hours, clacking on my keyboard. And I mean, I could go on. There's some insane experiences that came out of it. None of the screenplays were great. I realized that I was like, this phase was going to come to an end. But years later, when I went back when I started my own companies, when I got my own radio show, my own TV show, all this stuff, spending that time learning the craft of screenwriting was so incredible for being a really good marketer and being really good at writing copy, that this failure translated in something that was hugely powerful to propelling success in other aspects of my life.
That's so interesting. I really love your story. I find like a lot of synchronicity with my story as well too. But I think the other interesting thing that I think it's very important for is that your story sounds very similar to a lot of like, let's say, young millennials or Gen Zs right now, right? A lot of uncertainty, a lot of lack of, let's say, direction per se. So I just really like the fact that, you really bet on yourself and you really just work things out and figure it out. So, and harkening back to your initial thing of telling your younger self, just chill out, like it'll work out, right? I think that's a very important thing, or a very important message right now, right? But because again, like I actually had a very similar story. I have a poli sci background. Out of school, I wanted to get a job at CSIS. They laughed, so I got a job on Bay Street instead. And then basically I worked more so into like the, let's say, the financial sales world, right? But it's very interesting, and I think the story you're sharing right now is very important, and I love the fact that it's being shared right now on this platform, because again, I think these are things people need to hear right now that actually provide impact and value, not just the whole work hard your whole life and work till you can't like sleep anymore or whatever, right? Like, don't get me wrong, I have a good work ethic, but it's also like, how what message are you illustrating that's going to dictate something that I want to live in? You know what I mean? Because like nobody wants to grind for the rest of that's not an enjoyable life.
That's
Like
right.
I was telling my girlfriend last night, like the best part of my day is lifting 405 pounds. Do you know what that says about me as a person? It's like needs to be other ways to like actually like exist as a human and actually grow as a person, right? In my opinion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I think I imagine you would feel the same because there are clearly moments where you have to grind. There's
Yeah,
just no question, right? And
yeah,
that's part of life. But I do think you're right, and I think that yeah, you have to find that joy in your life. I'm not awesome at it. There are definitely times where I get too focused in and and have to remember to pull myself back to go be. I mean, I think I'm a good dad. I think I'm a pretty good husband, but I have to remind myself to like go enjoy that and be in my life in those ways too. But I think again to come back to the 19-year-old, I think that it's also life actually is long. Life is not short. Life
yeah,
is long,
yeah,
and the for the work that I do today around climate, the thing is, like, we didn't get too far into it, but when I see companies today, and I see a lot of them that are really are having quite an impact. I see companies that are, in industry where, one of the biggest issues in the world is that industry needs so much heat to make stuff. You need natural gas, boil, anything, right? Glass, dog food, you're cooking, you're heating, steel, cement, it's all heat. And so this one company figured out, well, we could replace the natural gas, the boilers that are basically like ubiquitous in the industrial world, which is like 25% of all carbon emissions, with bricks that you just heat the bricks, and then the bricks can actually like act like a battery in your EV in your electric car, but it's not lithium. You're going to store the heat literally in bricks with like toaster wire kind of running through it, right? And then we can take that heat and give it to the factory as steam, or just like a natural gas boiler would do. We can it's a company called Rondo Energy. And the guy who came up with the idea, he's like in his 60s, maybe like he's an elder gentleman, and the only reason he figured out how to do this was because he failed for years trying to figure it out doing, lots and lots of other things. To solve the same problem. And it wasn't just on the technology, it was like on the financing. How do I make this like palatable to big investors to want to underwrite these huge contracts to actually, right? So where I'm going with this is my message to myself at 19, which might be hard to understand because I feel like I've learned from like the school of hard knocks, without a lot of mentors, but still is like get experience, just find what are you passionate about? Where do you think there's meaning? What industry do you want to be in? What profession, like what do you just naturally kind of gravitate to? Do you like marketing? Are you an engineer? But just try and get to places where you can go get good experience and experience, get around companies. And this is what I would tell myself: go get around other founders, go get around other CEOs, see how they build, see what they do well, see what they do wrong, see what you would do differently, and just build your network, build your expertise, so that when your moment comes, you're really ready to go build that company, if that's your path, right? If that's your
mhm,
entrepreneurial path.
yeah.
when I was building my first furniture company, this was back in 2004, this company called Vivavi, or like Viva V, Live Life. And it was eco-friendly furniture. And I opened a showroom in New York City. I couldn't afford an apartment and a showroom, so I turned my apartment into a showroom, and I like lived in it for 4 years. You know,
That's awesome.
it was in Greenpoint. It was really, it was very New York.
Yeah.
But that moment, I remember in 2004, when I got very interested in this idea of design and sustainability and making it really modern and contemporary and fit a mainstream lifestyle, just doing really good design out of eco-friendly materials. And like 20 years ago, that was a new idea. You had like this sort of the prevailing view around eco-friendly furniture was like, oh, let's just, put some burlap over some twigs and like, tie a rope around it and like there's a chair, and we're like, no, like, and so when I started this company wanting to bring this idea to consumers, there were dozens of artisans, furniture makers, like really cool designers around the country who, for some reason at that same moment, had that same idea. They were in their late 20s, early 30s, had, spent years apprenticing, learning the skills, understanding how to actually make furniture, so that it all kind of converged in 2004, 2005, 2006, where suddenly there was all of this like really cool, beautiful, sustainable design coming to market. So I remember some of it coming out of Toronto. I won't think of the name, but I remember there was a company that we were working with out of Toronto. Nobody knew each other, but there was something that happened in the culture where people were like, I've had enough. I have enough experience now to go actually make something based on my values. I'm going to go for it. And it was such a cool moment. And so, but had they done it 5 years earlier, they wouldn't have had the skills to succeed. They wouldn't have known enough as a furniture maker. It was right. The timing was right. People had enough seasoning to really nail it and put products in market that mainstream consumers loved. It was awesome. It was like the beginning of, it was like green sort of, I don't know, 1.0, 2.0, but it was really the beginning of sort of the modern green movement. It was an awesome time.
And like that was pretty much done by like failing hard and failing fast, or like whatever that term is, right?
Yeah, that's right.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I want to be cognizant of your time. What's the best way or the best channels for people to reach out to you, get in contact with you?
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So if people are interested in Super Cool, our podcast newsletter, well, you can find the podcast anywhere, but getsuper.cool is where all of our stuff's there. We're actually getting ready to launch this course called the Climate Adoption Playbook. So taking from what we did at Planted and what all these other companies are doing to actually succeed and drive their products into the market. So we found that actually there's like similar tactics that the companies that succeed all apply to overcome barriers and really scale. So we're getting ready to launch that course. It's all at getsuper.cool. And then I'm mostly on LinkedIn. And so if anyone listening wants to reach out, you can find me there.
Okay. Perfect. Appreciate the time today, and hope you have a good one. Okay. So yeah, tell me more about this playbook. I'd love to hear more.
So, at Super Cool, we've spent a year talking to many of the world's best climate companies that have figured out how to win customers, grow profits, capture market share, really on their mission to transform whatever industry they're in and make their brand of climate business and sustainability the default. So we case study their businesses. We look at what are their superhero capabilities. How are they doing this? How are they winning? How are they surpassing their competitors? How are they surpassing like legacy incumbents? What's so special that makes them win? Because when they scale revenue and they scale climate impact. And so we've distilled that down into a course where we are sharing with other founders, CEOs, investors who want to understand what does it take to actually build a climate company that can win, that can scale, and can overcome the hurdles and barriers that are in the way. And so we draw on like 50 case studies. We lean into, my experience from Planted as well, just understanding, okay, how do you position a product? How do you communicate it? How do you design it so that the market can accept it very quickly and it can scale? So we call that the Climate Adoption Playbook. If people want to find out more, they can find out more at getsuper.cool/playbook.
And you're launching it now, or is it already launched?
We'll be launching really in over the next few weeks.
Okay. Perfect. People should keep an eye on that. Okay. Just wanted to add that segment as well too, to obviously like have that discussion, but now we're done.
Cool.
Okay.
Thank you.